Hello and welcome to Adapod, a podcast by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I'm your host, Emilio Garcia. Today, we talk to Katerina and Elliot of the ATA about nicotine vaping in Australia, as well as education in Australia. Please enjoy the episode, and remember that due to the holiday season, this is going to be our last episode for a couple of weeks. Please stick around after the episode to learn more about the ATA and enjoy the episode. Okay, here we are once again in the Australian Taxpayers Alliance office. We're here with Katerina and with Elliot. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
You didn't have a choice, you work here, but still, I appreciate it. We're going to talk really quickly about education, because since Monday, essentially, there's been no good news for Australian education. A report from PISA, which is the international certification kind of... I don't know if it's certification, but it basically measures the standard of different countries' level of education. That was damning. It really was. Our spending on education has gone up severely, dramatically over the last 10 years, and our students are doing worse off than they were 10 years ago. And I mean, it's just mind-boggling. But Elliot, you've been kind of across the story, so do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for New South Wales, it's been especially embarrassing, which is bad, being obviously the biggest state in the country, the de facto capital of Sydney, even though the little goblins down the swamp like to think otherwise. But yeah, the PISA results for Australia were really, really bad news. So we slipped a number of places across math and literacy, and in New South Wales, that was particularly bad. New South Wales, I think, ranks 5th now of the Australian states.
What?
Which is really, really poor performance.
Unreal.
The results are particularly interesting when you look at the funding as well, because obviously one of the things that people like to say is that we just need to throw more money at it. Great solution to every problem, right? But no, because our results from 2015 onwards have been falling in the PISA scores. And since that time, the 2014-15 financial year, the budget of the education department went from $38 billion to $46 billion. So it's increased by about $1.5 billion a year every single year for the last 5 years, and our PISA scores continue to tumble.
So for every $1.5 billion that we invest, we're essentially getting in return less educated students. Yeah,
we're getting about a term or so dumber for every $1.5 billion that we throw at it. That's really a big problem for us.
Well, I mean, it's never failed before. I don't know why the government would be so surprised. Every time that we try to improve something simply by increasing the budget, it's always had fantastic results. I don't know why anyone could think that wasn't kosher. So let's discuss this a little bit, because essentially the way I think in which PISA checks all of this is essentially with the test scores, right? So PISA has an international test, and I believe that China was number 1. Yeah.
I wonder why.
Exactly. I was told by Brian, the executive director, that we have to be a little bit cautious of those numbers, because since it is China, they very much control what comes out. It can be that they're just reporting in the large cities and whatever. Still, in the large cities, there's many more people than in all of Australia. After that, we had countries like Singapore, not surprisingly. I believe Sweden is doing better than us. And I guess we have to wonder, what is Australia really doing wrong?
I mean, there's things that we can theorize, I guess. I mean, what are kids learning? What's changed in the curriculum? What's more important?
Yeah, well, there certainly has been a relatively big shift in the curriculum away from the conventional, the 3 R's approach, the reading, writing, arithmetic, that everyone sort of grew up being familiar with. There's been a lot more of a drive towards student-driven learning, which is obviously where teachers are less prescriptive about what they teach and how they teach it, and students are encouraged to give their feedback and talk about how they learn, which is a pretty dubious concept, given that they're there to learn rather than be teaching teachers. But that probably has something to do with it, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's kind of like what Kat was saying a second ago. It's like, okay, sure. I mean, PISA results on their own are damning, but I mean, is there a greater issue within the Australian educational system, which is to say, is it just that our students aren't performing well when it comes to mathematics and reading and science, I believe was the other one? Or is it that we're just teaching them wrong?
Well, yeah, it's probably a mix of teaching them the wrong thing. I mean, separate to that, we see kids being encouraged to just ditch school to go to protest protest the weather. So, I mean, that's also happening.
That's probably why they have such low science scores.
Yeah, probably.
Listen to the science. Like, you listen to the science.
We're not listening to the science, so...
You don't understand it. Look at PISA.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, there's probably a few things that are contributing to it, but throwing money at the problem hasn't worked in the past, so if that's just what we're going to go with, is that... Yeah. I don't know if that's the best route to take to fix this problem.
Yeah, and speaking of spending and education, we've had a politician who's had themselves quite a luxurious trip on our dime, haven't we?
Sarah Mitchell.
Yeah, so what was the story there? I did understand at a very basic level that essentially a public employee basically used our money to give her and her staff just a luxurious first-class vacation.
Yeah, so 8 days overseas, and she spent $90,000.
$90,000.
That's something that, like, that's more than the average salary of the average Australian.
I was about to say.
She spent that in a week?
For 8 days. Yeah.
It gets even worse, right? When you look at the trip in more detail. So she took herself and one staffer, and then there was a departmental official who accompanied her. That was the total cost for the three of them, came to $90,000. Wow. What's really impressive is that to visit 2 countries in 8 days, between herself and her staffer alone, they managed to rack up $48,000 in flights.
Kidding.
That is something else. So the transport costs get even better when you look at what they did on the ground, right? So $48,000 for the flights for just Minister Mitchell and her staffer. They also then spent nearly $2,000 on chauffeurs taking them around. Like, so clearly the minister hasn't heard of Uber or Lyft or like one of the countless variants that they have over there.
That was going to be my question, because I thought when I saw chauffeur, I was like, oh, does that mean that she's just like taking Ubers and that's how you categorize the expense?
Yeah, well, if she's taking Ubers, they're Uber
very expensive,
right?
Uber.
Yeah. They have limousines.
One for her, one for the other one, going to the same place or something.
Yeah, she just happened to share an Uber with no Elon Musk or someone like that, maybe. You might have billed her for it. And then I think for the group of 3, so her staffer and her and this departmental guy, they managed to rack up $10,000 on 8 nights accommodation. I don't know where they were staying, but that's nice, right? That's not your Airbnb. That's not a mid-range hotel even.
Right.
That's hundreds and hundreds of dollars per night per person. It's like $400 and some odd dollars a night for all of them.
Can you repeat that figure just really quickly?
So it's $10,000 for 3 people for 8 days. I reckon I could get a 10-year-old to Google me a cheaper accommodation for 3 people for 8 nights. What do you reckon?
Definitely.
And quite nice.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
That is that's really unbelievable. And what was the purpose of this trip?
Yeah, so this is the interesting one. With all the criticism, her response has been, well, we had to go over there to study comparable school systems to determine why these countries are doing better than we are, because they are. Right. And despite the fact Canada, for example, spends less money than they do, the United States spends less of their GDP on education than we do, and still they're outperforming us.
Right.
So she had to go and inspect a bunch of schools, which is interesting because last time I checked, you don't have to actually pay to have a chat with a school principal, especially if you're a minister. They make time for you.
Yeah,
it's not a pay-to-play kind of thing. So how did she spend all this money on such a pointless expedition to study schools which are fundamentally the same by her own or the admission of the ministry itself? They are similar school systems.
Yeah. No, and I'm just wondering, I mean, maybe it's just because I'm not in the education space, but do you need to go to the United States and have a luxurious time in order to learn these things? Can't you look at documents or reforms? Can you see what was done before and after? I mean, all these things, it's very bureaucratic in the United States. So I'm sure you could see what they're doing without having to spend, what was it, $90,000?
Yeah, $90,000 for the trip. It's an interesting approach to it. I don't exactly think the taxpayers are getting a lot of value out of paying that much money. You're nearly talking $100,000 just to have someone walk around a few classrooms. Because it's not as if you walk into King's or Scott's or one of the other high-performing schools in Australia, and we do have some remarkably high-performing schools, you don't get a picture of education across Australia by walking through a few good schools. Likewise, if you went to a few of the lower-performing schools in our country, you don't get anything by walking around a couple of schools that will tell you anything about the national curriculum or the reason their country is doing better.
And certainly not for a day. I mean, education is a long-form process. I mean, you have kids being educated, that's important to absorb, but you need to absorb it over more than one day, I'm guessing. I'm sure it's different during exam seasons. I'm sure that it's different nearing the end of the year. I mean, all these things would have to be looked at holistically. I'm guessing, again, I'm not an education expert, but I'm just saying, like, based on the way in which you would try to absorb any issue, if you just try to see one day, one thing, you're probably not going to learn very much. I mean, I don't know if I'm going out on a limb here, but would it just sound like maybe also, she decided to treat herself to a nice trip?
Yeah, I think ultimately this just shines a light to how little our politicians care about where and how much they're spending our tax dollar on.
Yeah.
Something like this should be an uproar. We should be holding them accountable for just absolutely wasting taxpayer money.
And this is buried on page 100 and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to continue if we don't, put a stop to it.
It is crazy. Australia seems to be very trigger happy when it comes to spending and to regulating. I mean, I've lived in a lot of places.
I mean, look, like what Elias just said, we continue to throw money at education.
Yeah.
It's not working. So what's the solution? We go and spend more money to go and walk around a classroom.
Yeah.
And that costs $100,000.
Unreal.
Come on.
No, and then, I mean, okay, let's say that you justify that expense. I don't know how you could. But then, okay, where are our results?
Where are the results? Exactly.
Like, I need to know, if you spend $100,000, exactly what you learned, how that's going to be implemented, what's going to change over the next whatever period of time. Because right now what it seems is like, oh, I went to exploration mission.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so ultimately, if, our politicians are going to spend money, they should be held accountable at least. So we know, they're spending that money.
Yeah.
Justified.
Right. Well, I do remember early on when I just got to Australia, I was still a student, and I went to the Centre for Independent Studies for a conversation. Now, we don't want to talk too fondly about the CIS. They're our competition. Our podcast is much better than theirs, by the way. But they were talking about the fact that it seems that a lot of programs implemented, a lot of government programs, are approved essentially just like on a conceptual basis. So they say, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're going to achieve, yada, yada. And then there's no follow-up. So, like, did you achieve, like, what were your metrics? What were you trying to achieve? Were you able to do that? Nope. And I think that's the same thing here. Whatever her name is, what's her name?
Sarah Mitchell.
Sarah Mitchell went and said, I want to go on a fact-finding mission to America to understand why they're doing better than us. And they said, that's a great idea. Here's the money. Parameters. What was going to be done after the K? No.
Well, just because the government sees the taxpayers, it's just a bottomless pit of money. There's no end. Yeah. If they need to buy, to pay for more things, they can just continue to tax us.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that's really telling in this case is that if you remember, I believe it was earlier this year, Bridget McKenzie, the sports minister, took a $24,000 flight from somewhere in the Northern Territory of Queensland down to the southern seaboard to watch an ice hockey game.
She took
absurd.
2,400 right? Or 24,000?
24,000. She chartered a private. It was an ADF flight, actually. It's a whole.
Was that a fact-finding mission?
Right. But when it came out, and it did come out, and it was very ugly for her, obviously, and rightly so. She said it was the only possible way for me to make it from point A to point B. And I would question the value of whether she needed to go from point A to point B, but it was true that there were no private flights from where she was to where she was going.
No public flights.
No public flights, sorry. But what Minister Mitchell came out and said was, we went there on a fact-finding mission, and we spent everything in accordance with the regulations. We did everything we were legally obliged to do. That's not what you say when you did the best you could. Right. Richard McKenzie said, there was no other way for me to do it, that's why it cost so much. Sarah Mitchell didn't say, we had to spend $90,000. Right. I had to spend $2,000 on chauffeurs and $10,000 on accommodation in just barely over a week. She just said, it was all legal, we were there on a fact-finding mission, I don't have to explain myself to you. But she does. She's not legally obliged to, but she does. She should have to explain herself.
There's a lot of legal things that you can get away with. I mean, I suppose that I could charter myself an Uber Black home every day and say, well, that's I'm your employee. I need to live. I need to get home. So You know, is it illegal? Are you going to throw me in jail? Probably not.
And that's
still inappropriate.
Someone, you work for a company and you do that. Someone from a council will come down and talk to you, and there will be overview. But there's not that overview in the public service. You tick the box to say, "I did everything by the books," and they say, "Okay, no questions asked."
Yeah.
But that's not good enough when the money that they are spending has been taken from hardworking Australians.
Oh yeah, indeed. Well, I mean, and this is getting off topic, but you know, right now, obviously, over the past many years, we had a construction project of a platform for internet, the NBN, the infrastructure for internet that, you know, very expensive. Last 53 billion, was it?
Yeah.
53 billion, behind schedule, over budget, just ridiculous, right? And now it turns out, not enough people are actually buying into it because it's not very good. So all the people that aren't using NBN, we're just going to tax them. And that just gives you some insight into the mind of the government, that for them, any issue that they have can be solved with our money.
Yeah.
It really can, because I mean, the government can't spend money really at scale it doesn't have. So that's why we have the taxes that we have, which is, you know, ridiculous and annoying. But speaking of ridiculous and annoying, I'm going to change the subject a bit. Vaping in Australia.
Yeah.
My word. Where do we begin?
Oh, where do we begin? That's an interesting question.
Because in Australia, obviously, it's not nicotine isn't legal. It's legal in, you know, patches and gum and things that don't.
Oh yeah, you can go to Coles and get spray that's got nicotine in it, and that's fine. That's all good.
But the one that actually works, vaping, the one that's like actually a viable alternative, the one that is relatively safe as compared to cigarettes, all that's illegal.
Ban it.
And for some reason, you know, Australia seems to be very, very rigid on the point. Most other developed countries,
I would say not so much. Yeah, it's just our policymakers are sort of picking and choosing what evidence they're looking at.
Yeah, well, they're looking at all the non-evidence essentially.
Like, well, that's exactly the point. So you know, just today we were on the Quit website. It's the iQuit website. It's just, some sort of new government initiative where you create an account and you can see different kinds of quit methods.
Okay.
And there's a sort of a forum where you can chat to people and have a bit of support. Upon looking at the information on that website, it seems like, you know, they're really into the quit with willpower, even though, you know, if it was that simple, no one would be smoking.
Of course.
You know, patches, nicotine replacement, Champix, all of that is sort of championed as a way to quit.
Yeah.
Whereas vaping, I mean, as they're not saying don't do it, which I guess is better than, you know, better. But what they're essentially saying is there's no evidence to support that vaping helps. There's evidence to support that people that vape still smoke. And it's not an effective government accepted way to quit.
Well, that's true.
Which is,
I mean, the very last point is true.
Technically is true, but
everything
Australia is the only government that is ignoring these facts.
Well, it's unbelievable. I mean, what we're seeing so far this year, because we're almost at the end of 2019, but so far, 1.9 million people in the UK quit smoking using vaping. 1.9 million.
Wow.
I believe.
That's huge.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. In Australia, and you know, I'll have to. I say this with a little bit of caution because we don't have the exact report yet, but it seems that we're going to see an increase now. The estimates go up officially for the number of of smoking deaths that go on every day, from 52 to 55.
Yeah.
So everywhere, New Zealand and the UK, the golden examples, since nicotine vaping was legalized, there was an acceleration of quit rates, just like that, immediately. And here, deaths are going up. What is the evidence that Greg Hunt is waiting for, or that the policymakers are waiting for?
Well, he's got his own personal bone to pick with vaping. So he's locking out a huge amount of you know, smokers in Australia who want to quit, who want to make the switch, but you know, when you've got the health minister and mainstream media saying that vaping is going to kill you, what are you going to do? Are you going to switch to something that's going to kill you when, you know, it's it's really just muddied the water of what's true and what's not true.
But even now, the corporate media has totally swayed. I think they got all the clicks that they could out of the hype, and like, oh, so now we're going to start reporting on the actual facts.
Yeah.
So now you have Forbes and the Guardian and like Fox and everyone except for BuzzFeed News, no surprise, are saying, yeah, I mean, we were wrong. Yeah. There was reason for concern. There were deaths that we didn't understand.
Yeah.
Now we understand them.
Well, now that we've looked into it, now that we know the cause of it, now that we know it wasn't legal vaping, we know it was, THC. THC and vitamin E acetate. Now that we know that, let's move on and let's steer the conversation into where it's supposed to be going in Australia. Yeah. Because the evidence is clear now.
That's right. And, America has a lot to answer for because they didn't get in front of the vaping trend very, very well. They didn't set up specific authorized places to sell nicotine vapes and whatever. That's why you saw kids ordering them. I mean, pretty small amount, but still, kids ordering Juuls to their house with no verification. Now they just had, ample nicotine. That's not good. But if there were a problem with vaping inherently, then why aren't we seeing the issues that we're seeing in the US everywhere where vaping is present? Which is to say, okay, yeah, there's vaping in the US. There's also vaping in the UK. There's also vaping in several parts of Europe. Canada. There's vaping in Canada. There's everywhere. We're not seeing deaths there. We're not seeing illnesses there. Doesn't that point to something? I mean, or are they just all dormant, just ready to, die on a whim? I'd say not.
It is slightly concerning that Greg Hunt said prior to announcing an inquiry into the health effects of vaping, nicotine vaping will not happen on his watch. Yeah. So he said that and then proceeded to call an inquiry, begging the question of why did he bother? And now what he says is that there are other countries around the world enacting bans on vaping. And if you actually look at who those countries are, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, countries with astounding public health records. Not really the countries you want to be taking your lead from. New Zealand, great public healthcare system. Yep. Our neighbours, you're probably the closest country in the world to us, geographically and otherwise. Yep. Legal. The UK, the origin of Australia. Again, we share a public healthcare system and a culture and everything. And legal. Canada, the United States. So many countries. It's
legal and seeing results.
Yeah.
Not even just, it's legal now, we're waiting. It's legal and we're seeing results.
Yeah, to the degree that the UK government is even pushing vaping. They've noticed that it's safe.
Doctors in the UK are recommending vapes as a way to stop smoking. Yeah. What is that telling us?
It's telling us that we don't have all the evidence and that it's very dangerous.
Not enough evidence.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. I do remember that interview, and Greg Hunt said it very openly, that it could be the most important thing that he ever does in his own position is to keep. And it's kind of
crazy as well because they're ignoring the evidence from the UK, the US, everywhere else, and they're saying we want Australian evidence. Yeah. Well, how do you expect to collect evidence when it's banned?
That's right.
You can't. So let's look to countries where it is legal, where it is successful, and let's learn something. Yeah. Because it's just not good enough. 54 deaths a day is not good enough.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even the success that Australia has had, considering that nicotine isn't legal with vaping, that people are grabbing the little hardware and just inhaling vapor that tastes like donuts or whatever.
It's amazing.
And a lot of them have managed to quit smoking just with the tool, not with the nicotine, and we're already seeing some pretty spectacular results here. I mean, we also have the people who are forced into the gray market by ordering it from New Zealand.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, okay, why are we forcing our citizens to break the law to make the best decision for their own health?
Yeah, exactly.
But you think about the absurdity of that situation where, because there's no denying that nicotine vaping happens in Australia. It happens. It's just that one. Obviously, we collect no tax from it. We employ our businesses don't employ as many people as they would. Our businesses don't employ as many people as they would if they had a bigger customer base from using nicotine vaping. If you were caught on the black market trying to buy nicotine patches or gum to quit smoking, you wouldn't be vilified the way people trying to bring nicotine in are today. Right. It's absurd. People are trying to quit smoking and save their lives, and to quit something which is horrendous, like cigarettes. Everyone hates cigarettes. Most smokers hate cigarettes. Yeah. But the people who want to quit with vaping, a proven, safer, effective technology, are vilified like they're drug smugglers or something. It's absurd to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it is crazy that we still have people who consider themselves serious politicians or serious people in policy saying that something that we have seen over and over fail as a viable alternative to smoking, that should be the one that we should focus on. Kind of like this quit page, which was like, just quit cold turkey.
Yeah,
you'll be fine.
Quit
with
willpower.
Yeah, which is
why did I need to read that? Why does anyone need to read that?
Well,
you can quit by just trying. Okay. Well, I assume most people that are on that website have tried that many times. The success rate for quitting cold turkey is something like 12%.
Yeah,
that's crazy. That's not a successful way.
Yeah,
that's not a very it's not really a good way to quit. And I'm sure there's some people that do. I know people that have been able to, and all the power to them. It is a really, really difficult thing to kick.
I bet.
Smoking cigarettes.
Well, you were able to quit just with vaping, right?
Well, just with vaping. I mean, the reason I quit was because Satya, who used to work here, our old policy director, pulled me up on the fact that I was voluntarily giving money to the government each time I purchased a packet of cigarettes. That mixed with my vape helped me quit.
Perfect.
I can't say it was just it was definitely the vaping definitely helped me, but that little piece of thing to remember was
that after the government takes all of this money from my paycheck, I also need to give them a little bit more for my CDs. Yeah, unreal.
But vaping's made it so much easier, and that's the reason people are finding it. You know, in the UK and the US and everywhere else where it's legal, they're able to quit because it is so successful because it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I think the free market has provided us with a life-saving tool. It wasn't necessary to have the government put the boot on people's neck. It just appeared. It was efficient, and people are going to it. So hopefully we'll see some movement there. We're obviously working every day to see movement in the right direction. But we're going to stop here. Thank you both so much for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Adipod, a podcast by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. If you care to know more about the ATA, visit their website, www.taxpayers.org, where you'll be able to see their mission statement, their projects, campaigns, objectives, and so much more. Remember, listening to the podcast is free, but creating it isn't. If you'd like to continue to see the Australian Taxpayers Alliance advocacy, please consider becoming a member or donating. You can do this on their website as well. This has been Adipod. We'll see you next time.